And I'm going to edit the beginning of this out so I don't have to worry about this showing. All right, here we go. And of course, my dog, can you hear my dog barking? Okay, like, of course, my dog's barking right when I want to start. All right, here we go.
Welcome to Parents Tool Talk Radio with your host, Jody Johnston Powell, licensed social worker, certified family life educator, second generation parent educator, and author of the award-winning book, The Parents Tool Shop, the universal blueprint for building a healthy family. For over 25 years, Jody has been training parents and family service professionals nationwide and serving as a parenting expert to the media worldwide. Now, through the Parents Tool Talk show, Jody shares her practical advice and introduces you to other experts who can give you proven, effective advice on the issues that matter most to parents. So get ready to be informed, entertained, and enlightened as we join Jody now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's Parents Tool Talk. And I am excited because this month, I get a chance to have a longer conversation with a new friend. I met her through the Family Life Coach Association. Her name is Christy Howard. And she, along with that, I'm going to let her explain a little bit more what she does with her coaching. But she had me on her podcast, and then I wanted to bring her on with you and talk about some mommy me time. Life is so stressful, and she does a great job of reaching out to moms and really validating our need and our right and deserving of being able to give ourselves some self-care. And so I wanted her to come on. I'm going to only mention this once. It is the holidays, but this is a timeless topic. But I did think that when we recorded this live that it would be a great month to do it because it's one, but every month is probably busy for moms, but school time and holidays are especially times where moms might not make time for self-care. So I really wanted to give time for that. So Christy's lives in Austin, and she's in Texas, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself, maybe share a little bit about how you came to do what it is that you're doing and kind of what your real passion focus is. And then I've got lots of questions I'm excited to ask you and learn more about what you do.
Fantastic. Well, I'm ready to dive in. So, yay! My name is Christy. I live in Austin, Texas, as Jody said, and I am trying to do as I suggest other moms right now. I'm not sure if you can see anything in the background, but I'm actually at the coast. I am here on a retreat right now. So, I'm trying to also practice me time as well. It's a continuous thing. I have my bachelor's in family and consumer science from Texas State University, and I enjoyed that line of work and decided I needed to find something a little bit more specific for me. So I learned about coaching. I found the Family Life Coaching Association, and I learned how to become a certified professional coach. And I joined that organization, and that is so near and dear to my heart. I am the vice chair of the Family Life Coaching Association, and it has been such a blessing for me. I feel like it is a group of people who really advocate and care for families and growing personal growth, just the dynamics of the importance of family and what it can do for the world really makes a huge difference. So I love being a part of that organization. That's how we connected, and I can't sing its praises enough. My business, I specifically focus on moms. So I help overwhelmed moms learn put themselves first while removing the guilt. And let me tell you, that's sounds simple, right? Like it's one sentence, but it's a continuous thing all the time. And I have a little story for you there, Jody, if you're ready for one. Um, this is something nobody's perfect. So I am here right there with you. I want everyone to understand and be able to connect. I had a very sweet, kind person give me a gift. And I had never heard of this before. It's called Sugar Wish. Have you ever heard of that, Jody?
No.
I hadn't either. And so I open an email and it says, "You've received a sugar wish." Okay, cool. What is this? And I knew the person's name. I know the person, so it wasn't like a spam email because my first thought was, "Mm." So I click on it and I look at it and it's really neat. It's a company that has a website where you can choose cookies or popcorn or like hot cocoa, different sugary, like a treat during the holidays or anytime. And so my first instinct, I'm on date night with my husband and we're playing a game, and so my first instinct was to check it and see what it is, and I'm excited because it's a gift. So I click on it and I'm talking to my husband and I say, "Okay, well if we get the cookies, then I'm not sure if I really want to eat all those, but I know my daughter will. And then popcorn, well, everybody would like the popcorn." And he just stops me and he says, "But this is for you. You should get what you want." I just started crying at the table, in the middle of the restaurant. Like, that wasn't my first instinct. This was somebody's gift to me, and I'm trying to think about everybody else in the family. So I just want everyone to think about it that way. It's a continuous thing, and having people in your corner who can remind you of that is really special and important.
It definitely is. Wow. And yeah, I think as moms, we do have a tendency to put everybody else first. So to get permission, and which we shouldn't have to get permission, but it's almost like we often don't think of doing that unless we are diligent and conscious, and kind of intentionally do that for ourselves, which can be
Yeah.
difficult without guilt, which I'm sure is the other piece we're going to be talking about here soon. But to be able to say, yes, pick what you want. I'm always thinking about, well, what will accommodate everybody, trying to
Mhm.
make everybody happy. And when do I get a chance to kind of just pick what would make me happy or what I would like? So that's a wonderful story. I can see why that would bring tears to your eyes. Very supportive. So, so why is it so hard for us to do nice things for ourselves without the guilt? I feel like over the, 30 years I've worked with moms, tens of thousands of moms, and I feel like no matter what, we all feel guilty. It's like if you do go to work, you feel guilty because you're leaving your kids. If you stay home, then you're guilty because maybe you're not contributing. If you, you know, every choice, it's like, bottle versus breast, there's guilt. It seems like there's guilt with everything. And guilt is such a heavy, negative energy that we don't need to be carrying around. But yet I find that even when no one else is dumping it on us, we tend to dump it on ourselves. So what's your
Yes.
insight to that? What do you think that's
Yes.
about?
I think you hit the nail on the head. We're dumping it on ourselves and we're not communicating with one another. And the outer expectations are ridiculous. So there was an article I was reading the other day, and I don't want to misquote it, so I'm not going to say exactly what it was. But the article was talking about moms who are in the workforce, basically saying they hire a lot of people for different services and they feel so guilty and so shameful that they've hired help people to help them for their family that they don't talk about it to anyone else. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this needs to change. We all need to be like, yeah, I had to hire somebody to do my laundry because I was doing 2 loads of laundry a day. I have a newborn. They were going through everything. So it's these expectations that we're putting on ourselves, and it's just been passed down because that's what society thinks it should be. And that's when I'm like waving the flag. Okay, let's stop this right now. And I'll be the first one to come out and say, I when I have stories and all kinds of courses or groups with my business, I'll put pictures of my house. I'm like, this is what my counter looked like today. This is what happened when my daughter got into the playroom. I have a whole video on when my daughter, and I'm very proud, a whole video. She ripped open one of the pillows that have the tiny little beads in them,
Oh.
and she made snow all over her room. And I posted, I want everyone to know that these are kids. This is family. This is how it goes, and that's okay.
And
It's
that's our
supposed to be
priority.
that way.
Yeah, and that's our priority. I have been a mom and was working from home long before there was an internet. I had started working from home, and that has increased and given a whole lot more options. But when you work from home, and on one income, I didn't have enough to pay for all of that help. So, yeah, you either drive yourself into the ground trying to do it all, being super mom and exhausting yourself and not being there for your kids, or you set
Mhm.
some priorities. And yeah, I there was a book, this is an oldie but a goodie, but there was a book way back in the 80s. It was called Sequencing by Arlene Rosen Cardozo. I still remember this. It was made such an impression on me. And she said, you can do everything you want in your life, just not all at once. Sequence your life. And so when I was home with my
Mhm.
kids before I had knew what I was really doing with a business, I was just kind of doing things to make ends meet. And then I started a nonprofit, and that started to evolve. And that's kind of where I started doing more at home business, and then eventually went online. But it was like, now is my kids are only going to be young once. Like, I want to be there for them. I don't want to miss this. And when they go to school, then I'll work while they're at school. And then when they are older, then maybe I'll travel, or whatever. And so I tried to sequence my life in that way to make it more manageable. And yeah, I just had to kind of lower my expectations and standards around things like how often I vacuum. I mean, if I had babies in
Mhm.
the house still, or toddlers that are putting things in their mouth, then yeah, maybe I need to be vacuuming every day, especially with my dogs who drag in, leaves and all kinds of other stuff. I would need to vacuum every day. But I don't necessarily do that. And the older I get, it hurts to vacuum every day. My old back is starting to hurt now with that. So I think we do need to honor, where we are in life, where our bodies are, where our families are, what our children need. If I had a special needs child, I would need to prioritize that, you know.
And
So
that's a whole nother, I'm so glad that you said that because that's a whole nother niche. And I understand that too. I feel like I do not have the strength and understanding and um, education for that. But I do have moms who come to me because they're like, my kid is neurodivergent. I know you get it. I'm like, yep, I got a couple of neurodivergent people in my immediate family. Let's chat.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what suggestions do you have? Like, where can moms kind of start with, okay, I got it. You get me. I got it. I'm kind of getting, okay. I know I should. And again, it's another should. You know the saying,
Yeah,
don't
oh
shit
yeah.
on yourself.
Don't shut all over yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're always shitting all over ourselves, in terms of the self guilt. So how do we let go of that? And kind of what's a first step of being able to start in this? Because I know it's a transition. It doesn't happen overnight. But what are some
Right.
suggestions that you have for mindset and maybe some actual steps to take?
Yes, I love that. So that's the first thing is honestly acknowledging that it's happening because we go through life so quickly. And I know so many moms who they go from one thing to the next. That's just their their second nature. So the first thing is to acknowledge that's what's going on. Okay, this is what it is. And then thinking about the small, tiny, I am all about baby steps. Have you read the James Clear Atomic Habits book
No.
or heard of it? Yeah. So there's a book that is called Atomic Habits, and it's by James Clear, and he's brilliant. I mean, it it has so many nuggets. So I don't want to give all the goodies away. I want him to be able to get his credit, but especially for moms, you have to start small and tiny. So those 5 minutes. So I would say journal, take voice notes, whatever, form of communication you want for yourself. Because I know some people say, I don't like to journal. Well, I understand. You can do the voice notes too. Think about three things, not this big, long, extensive list, three things that just put a smile on your face. So for me, an example would be coffee. I love coffee. It just puts a smile on my face being able to sit with coffee. A second thing would be able to say a few affirmations. I have my affirmations that I love for the day. And then you make a list of just three of those. So when you get to an opportunity where you say, okay, I'm at this point, this building point, I feel it, I need to take a break. then you have something right in front of you that you can do immediately. And that's fantastic. So it's not this big long list of take a 2-hour bath or go to movie with your friends. If you don't have that time carved out already, you can still do something that's simple that will make you feel good. And you don't have to feel guilty about it.
That's a great idea. So starting small, I know when I teach anger and stress management, it's like, I don't have time to meditate for 20 minutes. And I'm like, deep breath takes 10 seconds. You do 5 of them, it's less than a minute. Everybody has 1 minute, and 5 deep breaths will stimulate that relaxation response. So when you go to the
Yes.
bathroom, you have a minute, put down your
Yep.
phone, quit checking your mail, just close your eyes,
Yep.
take 5 deep breaths. Like everybody has a minute. So yeah, everybody
Mhm.
has 5. If you can start
Mhm.
with a minute and do something, then work yourself up to 5. Start with 3,
Yes.
and then you mentioned something like, treating yourself to dinner or going out to lunch with a friend. If you were to, and you also said, unless you carve out the time. So, what if we actually made an appointment once a month and we blocked
Mhm.
off that time? And we could choose if we wanted to coordinate that time with someone else or just take time for ourselves and arrange for, if
Yeah.
we were a single parent, arrange for a friend. Maybe we could trade off with someone, or if we have a partner who's there or a co-parent that can take the child, then like we need
Yeah.
to get that break too.
I 100% agree. And I would even so this is a building process. I don't want to, I talk about sustainability with my clients so much. So I really want you to build up in this process. And Jody, I agree with you. I think you should even have one of each of those categories too. So you should do one on your own at least once a month. You should do one with the people, family, whoever, spouse, sister, insert who you want to spend your time with, that you want to connect with once a month too, because there's so much value in both of those activities. I think about when people talk about introverts versus extroverts and where they get their energy and what they do, and you can gain it both ways from being around people and not being around people, depending on what you do, but you still need those connections, especially after the pandemic. I know you and I have had this conversation, but this is something that I really want people to think about and resonate with. When everything first started happening, I looked at my husband and I said, this is going to be a mental health crisis. And when you think about the age of some of your children, let that resonate too. So, for example, my daughter, she's 5.5. A good portion of her life she's lived in the pandemic.
Yeah.
So that's also something that you have to think about too, is really having those boundaries of I need this and this is important.
Yeah. And trying to meet the needs that we know that we really do have, not denying needs.
Yeah.
Because yeah, and in us, we're grown. Hopefully our brains are fully formed and we're well balanced adults. Just because we to say that we have a need isn't a deficiency.
Oh
I
no.
think a lot of times
Yeah.
people think a need is somehow a weakness or a deficiency, which it isn't. There's lots of things that we do need to maintain that balance. And yeah, for kids,
Mhm.
it's even more important because part of their development depends on certain kinds of things. So I have a grandson who's 4. So he was a pandemic baby. He was born right before it. I watched, my daughter was a school teacher, and so I watched him as she finished out that year of school, and then she was going to switch and go to a different school, and then the pandemic hit. So he never has been away from her, and he just started preschool this year, and it was really hard. Had she not done some nannying during those years, he would have had no contact with other kids. And I can't imagine what a negative impact that would have been on his development. I think already only being around 1 or 2 other kids didn't help. But, we have to, and this is where I don't know that all parents are aware of child development stages, but it's something important for everyone to know. Because if you know kind of what children are doing at each stage, that can help you, identify what they might need. But we also need to take a look at what do we need. And some of that depends on our
Mhm.
stage of life also, right? When you are in the
Yes.
thick of things and you're having babies and you got lots of babies and they're still young and your body isn't your own and you're constantly nursing and being touched, you have a really high need to get some physical space to have your
Yeah.
body to yourself, you know. So
Yes.
depending on what stage we're at, we have needs too, and that those aren't deficiencies. Those are we need to respect that there's a need is there for a reason. It serves a purpose. And if we can recognize the purpose that that serves, then we can feed ourselves. Like we wouldn't starve ourselves, right? Food's a need. We don't, I mean,
That's what I was thinking of was food.
yeah,
When you said need, my first thought is food. That doesn't mean we're deficient. That means that we need something to sustain our bodies.
yes, yes. And for our mental health and our energy, and, we need connection and we need time away
Mm,
and we need to
yeah.
be able to not constantly be touched or, you know, even if you're a very
Mm,
touchy feely kind of person, there does come a point if you
yeah.
are, especially when you're nursing and you've got toddlers coming up along, yeah, where we all get that touched out phase.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so honoring that and being aware of what it is that your body and your emotions and mind are telling you you need and listening to that and honoring that is really
Yeah.
important.
And I feel like that's something as moms can be such a challenge too. It's just kind of listening to our intuition as well. Um, I don't know how open-minded some people can be about intuition, but I guess I use it in a word of I realize that there's some something higher than me, and I need to listen to signs of that. And so when you are able to pay attention to that as a mom too, that helps with your needs because you can ask. So for example, I have I have Purple Owl Story. It's basically if I need a specific sign, I'm not going to see a generic, blue ball. I'm like, I need to see a purple owl. And if I don't, that's also my sign. And Jody, there are no purple owls in nature, right? But I'll see the purple owl when I need it. I mean, I've seen it so many times, multiple times a month, somehow, some way.
That's
So,
really interesting. Yeah. So, and that's it's called the RAS system. It's the reticular activating system in the brain that when you focus on something, it will pick up on that and point that out
yes.
to you. So, yeah,
Mhm.
when you need a solution, when you need inspiration, I do often encourage folks to distinguish the difference between intuition and gut and what your gut says, because a lot of
Mhm.
people will mistake their gut feelings, which you can feel when you're upset or you're angry or and if I just go with my gut reaction, actually that can really lead us astray. When you were talking about your intuition, you talked about listening. And to
Mhm.
listen, you need to be quiet and silent. And when you are regulated, when we're self regulated and we're calm, and that's what will happen when we
Mhm.
do our self care, is that we will be
Yes.
able to get more in touch with our intuition and being more in touch with, we'll be able to hear those things that
Mhm.
will help direct us. And there's a place for everything. There's a place for emotions, there's a place for logic, there is a place also for those emotions that are dysregulated that are a sign of where we need to regulate to get back into balance. Everything is sending a message if we just know how to interpret that message. And intuition
Yeah.
is also equally important. With
Yeah.
logic and emotion and spirituality, whatever that means for each person.
Yeah. And honoring those feelings.
Hmm.
I feel like
Yeah.
with children especially, they're taught right and wrong for specific things and this is how it is and I encourage with my kids, this is not something I want you to feel bad about. If you have a specific emotion, that's okay. Let's talk about that. Or if they're in the, they're not ready to talk about it because they're having, their moment, then that's when you have to find the ways to do things for yourself. And I will say too, it's also okay for you to say, I'm a little overwhelmed. I need to take a moment. So I hope that that's okay that I'm encouraging that. Jody, is that okay?
The choice
Because I do encourage that. I feel
yeah.
like our children look to us as role models. And if they see that we're also communicating our needs
Mhm.
We're not deserting them. We're saying, I need a moment. I'm coming back, you know.
Absolutely. And one of the best ways of teaching self regulation to children is to co regulate with them, which is not just doing anger and stress management on your own away from them. My parents were parenting instructors. They literally never got angry. I never saw my parents get angry. And as a result, I never learned how to manage my anger. I thought I just wasn't supposed to feel it. So it's really important because what we're doing with that is internal, and if we're either away
Mhm.
where they can't see it or we're just being quiet around them, they don't know the process that we're using to calm down. So it's a
Yeah.
tool I call openly modeling behavior, but it's basically like co-regulation, like, okay, come on, let's take a deep breath, and
Mhm.
I'm doing it for myself as much as I'm doing it to help them learn, you know.
Yeah.
And if we do need to separate, I always say if your choice is yelling or doing something you're going to regret with your kids and making sure they're safe so you can get a few minutes away, go take that time for
Yeah.
yourself. That safety always is most important. So don't give up your
Yeah.
needs if you're going to end up resenting it or taking it out on them later.
Yeah. And I also think about seagulls, the red zone, you know. If
Yeah.
they're in the red zone, you need to let them have that, you know, and at least with one of mine, I need to let that child have that. You know, they're not coming down from that in the moment if I'm attempting to self-regulate. And so I need to let them have that, you
And
know.
direct that in a way that will help them in the way that works for them regulate. You were talking about
Hmm.
introvert and extrovert of that not everybody is helped by being around people and not everyone calms down by themselves. And yeah, figuring that out, that's part of the system that's in Parents Tool Shop of helping each person come up with an individualized plan of where to go has to do with more introvert, extrovert, not socially, but where you get your energy. And then what you
Yes.
need to do is either more expressive, you were talking about talk about it or journal would be more creative, or art would be expressive. And then there's other people that have this buildup of physical energy and they really need some kind of a physical outlet for that. So being
Mhm.
able to not just expect kids to do what we think they should do, but to really kind of learn how they experience that and then channel that in a way that's going to be helpful for them is really important. So, and that helps
Yes.
them
And
learn
that's
how to
why
self regulate.
yes, yes. And that's why I'm so grateful for the coaching model because I feel like the coaching model asks the questions for what you specifically need rather than saying this is the way to do it or this is wrong or try try this specific thing. It's an opportunity for collaboration, right?
Yeah. Well, and knowing what questions to ask are also really important. Not everybody knows what questions to ask.
Yeah.
Because there are some helpful questions that everybody can benefit from asking, and the way you answer them is totally specific to you. So, and
Yes.
it's knowing what questions to ask, and then knowing when you give your answer to that, what that means and how that's directing you, what direction that might point you to follow.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the things that you encourage moms to do when you mention when they're overwhelmed, or maybe if they're feeling stuck, to kind of help
Mhm.
kind of move them from help them recognize within themselves where they want to move in
Mhm.
terms of going from overwhelm to honoring themselves and giving themselves self-care.
I love that question. So one of the first things I like to do when they're in complete overwhelm and they're feeling like they just can't can't stop, stop, just stop. Okay, pause for a moment. Then in those opportunities, I say it's just like you said, they have that energy, right? They need the activity. And many times the moms that I coach, they have something else that they want to do as well. They have, an idea, a goal, something that will take longer. And so they just freeze. They're like, I don't know what to do. I I'm just frustrated and I don't know, what my next step is. And so this sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's fascinating the way that it works. I say, I want you to make a list of your wins. So that's the first thing that they say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Because then it gives you the activity, right? then it also reminds you, I've done these things before. Okay, I have my breath. Now I can take the next step. But it's something that I find time and again, there's so many women who they just say, I'm not sure, or they, I don't know. I feel guilty if I did this. Just like you said, if I go to work, I feel guilty. If I stay home, I feel guilty. I can't win, right? So when they've looked at what they've already accomplished and gone through and done in their lives, then they can say, okay, well, I shouldn't feel guilty. I've done these things and I can go and do this and feel good about this too.
And this too, I can move from a point of stuckness over to a point of success. So then it's a matter of kind of coming up with that roadmap, right? Of
Yes.
how to get there.
Yep. And the process that I use and time and again. And so I just need to create I have lots of PDF worksheets, etc. And I have a whole course on this. But I need to create a graphic just to show this specifically. But it's the triangle. So motivation, habits, and boundaries. Those are the core three that time and again I end up coaching with my clients. You have to find your motivation. That's going to drive your habits and help you sustain those boundaries. Then you start all over again.
And all three of those are important. If any one of those is missing, you would not probably be able to move forward and accomplish a goal that you want to accomplish.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And
Exactly.
boundaries, we've been talking a lot about boundaries because self-care is all about boundaries. So yeah, that's a big
Absolutely.
one. And as women in general, and particularly as moms and caretakers, we have a tendency to put our needs last and not have clear boundaries in that respect.
Yeah.
So that becomes hard.
It
I think
does. And that's why you have to start with the motivation, the why that
mm,
I think there's somebody who says the why that's going to make you cry. So when you have that feeling, that energy, that will help you continue in the process. But until you find the motivation to do that, if you're just doing it because you should, like we were saying,
right.
then that's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important to have that time to reflect and say, okay, I understand here, these are my motivations. But that's why I suggested the top three first as the feelings, because you need to be able to stop and sit and think. And so those smaller activities, that shorter time, will help you build up to start thinking about the bigger picture and your motivation.
Yeah. And motivation has to be internal. There's when it comes to self-improvement, self-growth, no one's going to, give you rewards and hold out bribes and do sticker shock, I mean, you can always track your own progress, in achieving a goal, which is different. But internal motivation is, and I think our society has become very skewed towards every time you do something, you get something. And the reason we do stuff
Yes.
is to get stuff. And there's
Mhm.
deeper motivations, that last longer if we're looking at internal motivations. Daniel Pink talks about the research that he's done, and it's skill mastery, autonomy, which is feeling like you have more control, and purpose. And if you look at those three things, in terms of what would motivate us to do things for ourselves, or even if it is a career goal or anything else that we might want to be motivated towards, those are three things that can help. If we focus on those, can help us get in touch with our internal motivation. Um,
I love that.
you mentioned that sometimes moms will be like, well, I don't really know like what to do, and this is one thing that I found, as I was doing my own self growth, and not necessarily as much as a mom, as much as an entrepreneur. I ran into this more, but it conflicted with me as being a working mom, of things maybe around money or this or that, where I knew that I needed a different mindset, but this is the only set of beliefs I had. Like I didn't know how else to think. And our thinking is really what drives, all that sounds good. And then I get out of your session and I'm back in my own head with my own set of beliefs that have got me here in the first place and aren't, I don't know where to go. So how are one of the things, let me just say for myself, one of the things that was the most helpful, I remember I was at a conference and there were other entrepreneurs there, and I did one of those hot seat things where you come up, and I was very vulnerable. It was really scary for me because I was very vulnerable about what I said, and said, this is something that I kind of have a fear about, and I don't know how else to perceive it.
Mhm.
To me, when I hear this, this is what I think. And over lunch, a couple people said stuff when I was up there, but over lunch, I was at a pretty big table and people started sharing their perspectives on it. And I was just kind of, open to hearing. And somebody said something. I'm like, bingo, that's one that I can go with. But I never would have thought of that thought on my own because of my own conditioning, and my parents, my
Mhm.
mom was the director of Christian Ed. She was in a church. Both of my parents were in nonprofits. Like you would brag about how little you were making, you know.
Oh gosh.
So it wasn't a mindset that was very good for financial success. And obviously, if I'm
Mhm.
I'm going to be trying to have my own business, that would be important to be able to do.
Yeah.
So how do you help with that? Because I know with coaching, it's more about asking questions. And so what kinds of
Mhm.
things do you do to maybe help folks view things from different perspectives or reframe things? Because in the moment, you can look at it this way, or you could look at it this way, and you might see it from a whole different
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah. I love that. I s- just you hit the nail on the head. And I'm curious if you don't mind sharing what the person said after I give you what I do. I'm curious if you don't mind telling us what that is. With my clients, I love that reframing. So I can do that. I I say there's several different things that you can do. You can select some sort of affirmation and continually write it down or say it. Select the affirmation that you're wanting to see so you can envision what it is. If you absolutely cannot see it, you can ask yourself, is this really true or is this just my perception? So, the best example that I can give is my children were in the back of the car arguing with one another because that's what kids do sometimes, right? My son says, "That's not this, it's that." And then my daughter says, "Yes, it is, it's this." And I think to myself, okay, well, that's her perception. So I explained it to my son. I said, if someone says this color is red and you don't see red, that's your perception. Somebody could be colorblind. They could be seeing it a specific way. So we all have what our own perceptions are. And I encourage people to ask others too that they're close to that they appreciate. So I have a very good friend who shares my same mentality, and sometimes when I'm challenged with things, she can ask me coaching questions and say, okay, what about this? Have you considered that that's not your only option? If you were to think of all of the other options, what would they look like? So, again, having some sort of community or person that you can also go to and say, I understand that I think this way, but I don't have to and I want to change. It's that desire, honestly, to change that will help us get out of the mentality of this is it. This is the only option.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe finding if you aren't currently surrounded by someone like that, think about someone that you admire or someone who is where you want to be. If it's
Yes.
someone who has a book or someone who has a website, even if they don't have, here's my affirmations, here's my beliefs, as you read, you get to see things from their perspective and can start to kind of adopt. I mean, our perceptions
Mhm.
are, and that's an ACC part of the brain, but that we literally do see things differently. I mean, we could watch the same event and walk away with different interpretations versions of it, or even
Mhm.
get on the witness stand and have different facts that we think are, that we would swear, in a court of law that we think are true. But it's really, it's not only what comes in, which we were just talking about the RES system. Not everything comes in, just what you focus on, what you already believe. That's what comes in because it validates your current beliefs. But then anything also that causes arousal. So if you had a negative experience with something, that has a tendency to weigh a little bit more. Or if you have had that repeated belief, repeated over and over, it's a much stronger neural pathway. So when these new beliefs come in, if we're open to, and that's the whole thing of being at least open minded, not that you're willing to believe anything, but like you said, if you go to trusted sources or you go to someone who's living life the way you'd like to live it, you feel like they're a good role model, a good example, and then learn from them, try to view. So then you can ask, how would so and so is in this situation, what might they say, what might they think, what might they do? So that might give
Mhm.
some a different way of looking at things and getting some inspiration. Because
Yeah, because as moms, we can feel isolated too.
yeah,
I know it's such an isolating feeling, even though you might see others every day. Since we don't, like I said, I'm waving up the flag. Let's talk about these things because if they're not talked about, then it does feel isolating.
yeah. It is, and we get isolated within our own heads, you know,
Mhm.
that if we can get very stuck in our programmed way of thinking, when really there's an infinite number of ways of looking at any situation. They might not all
Yeah.
be accurate, they might not all be factual, they might not all be healthy or, positive, but there are an infinite number of ways of looking at it. So we really do have
Yeah,
a choice, of how we perceive situations, and therefore that then can help put us on a maybe more positive path to achieving our goals. Yeah.
right.
And you
Yeah.
talked about also envisioning. I think that's, they say that if you can envision it, you can achieve it. If you can imagine yourself already having it, the brain
Hmm.
doesn't know the difference between a real and imagined event. So if you can imagine it
Right.
happening, the body reacts as though it's already happening. It's the thought that
Yeah.
creates that energy and that feeling of, I already have this. So then it becomes very real, and that help can really help with motivation also, because that's how things happen. That's what sports, we see the athletes closing their eyes, imagining themselves succeeding, right? We
That's
get
what I think of. Isn't that where they did one of the first tests of it? Jody was with the Olympics, the Olympian
probably.
athletes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been in sports coaching for a long time. Of you're the track coach doesn't say go out there and don't trip over the hurdles. You know,
Right.
he says go out there,
Yeah.
imagine your light as air, imagine you're a gazelle, they would use
Hmm.
words that would create the picture in the mind, because that then creates the ability of being able to do it. So, and we experience the mind not knowing the difference all the time. If you have a phobia of spiders and I say there's, imagine there's a spider crawling up you, you would still shiver. It's not really
Yeah.
happening, but the mind doesn't know the difference. So you still have the
Yes.
physiological reaction. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of what keeps us stuck. There can be no one outside of us really putting limits on us, but we put limits on ourselves because of the way that we think, and can get
Yeah.
ourselves kind of stuck in this way of thinking. And we don't necessarily know how to break free of that unless we see some other examples. If we can't come up with them in our own minds, then seeing those other examples can be really helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because there's, like you said, there's infinite number of examples too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of finish with what you were sharing with in terms of some of the process that you think is helpful, and that you will sometimes walk folks through with your coaching process of, so we've got, imagining what that goal is, seeing it from different perspectives, helping them work with some affirmations. I know that's something that I often work with folks too on, of getting the ing in there, conflicting beliefs. If I say, oh, I am always punctual, and I know I'm not, you know, then my brain isn't, I'm not going to make that shift. I say every day I'm becoming more punctual, then that's going to move me forward, if my goal is to be on time more or whatever. So yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many fascinating things about how the brain operates, in terms of
Yeah.
how that really shows up for us every day in real ways.
And I like the saying the Sorry, I was thinking the ing as you were saying that. I have heard that one too. I like that. I like now that. I am so happy and grateful now that.
Ah, yeah,
Because then you're recognizing, okay, it's coming. It may not be right now, but it's on its way. I can see it.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
happening.
And now means that you're bringing it into the present moment, like you're imagining it now, what it is
Mhm.
like. And just imagining it being here now helps bring that, it takes you a step closer towards it being a reality, of being able to
Yeah.
picture your goal already
And
achieved.
I also think that the mentality, and I will fully admit I can be challenged by this too. You can have lots of steps and have a specific way that you envision the goal process going. And I really encourage my clients to not always think about what the steps are. If you can see it, that's all that
Yeah,
matters. So you need to be open to other opportunities and suggestions rather than just these specific
yeah.
um, ways of doing it. So, for example, I had a client who had 4 kids, and she was just super upset about bedtime and not getting enough time to herself. And we worked out a plan for her. Said, okay, let's try this. And it did not go the way that she wanted, and she was upset. And I thought, okay, this is one of those moments where we're just going to have to let this simmer. She can think about some other opportunities. And then the following time that I met her, she said, oh my goodness, I was so happy. Guess what? And she had like the older ones reading to the younger ones, and they were guiding. The older ones had recognized that she was stressed and overwhelmed, came up with this solution, and they were helping the younger ones get to bed. And she was just so happy because she said, I didn't have to do anything. And I said,
Yep.
that's what I mean. Sometimes you just have to be open to the other
Yeah.
opportunities. Even though you had it set this way of what you wanted,
Mhm.
something better can happen too.
Absolutely. Yeah. If we're clear on the what, we don't have to figure out the how. So, I
Mhm.
mean, that doesn't mean you just sit around and go, "Oh, I'm just gonna, wait for the universe to do this for me." I mean, we can still, okay, so what
Yeah.
can I do to be ready, or what can but in terms of
Mhm.
trying to control how it happens, I think that's the trap that I'm hearing you talking about that we can get in of
Yes.
we're trying to make it happen rather than
Mhm.
focusing on the what, preparing ourselves, maybe taking some steps. It is important to take action steps, to not just sit back and, wait, for
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But the other thing, we were talking about the RES a little bit earlier. That's one of the things is that if you present the brain with a problem, it goes about finding the answer. It's looking
Mhm.
out there. It's, looking
Yeah.
for, and so you can literally wake up and someday it just comes right to you because your brain, has been out there. There's all this data out there, and it's,
Mhm.
kind of bringing that in that the idea may come to you. And then there's other ways, just as you shared. That's a really great story that others, our change in energy, any time we make a change, everybody has to adjust to that. So even maybe by
Mhm.
her saying, "Hey, I need a few minutes," and she didn't have to ask her anything, but just in that moment, or her kids seeing that, took the initiative to be supportive to each other, which is a really cool story. That's really
Mhm.
great how that happens. Yeah. So we don't have to
Yeah.
worry
I
about the
was
how.
very
Thank
happy for
goodness.
her. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like moms, honestly, out of out of a lot of the different types of people, moms have the biggest challenge with not being in control.
Yeah, so let's
I
talk
I
about that, right?
Yeah, so I feel like that's where the guilt comes from too, the always having to feel like they're doing and, you know, packing the kids' lunches or organizing something for, their school or packing something for daycare or waking up and saying, "Oh my gosh, I need to go to the grocery store with the baby today," or, all of these things, but just the whole idea of feeling like we have some sort of schedule and being control and doing things a certain way. And then when you bring in coaching and you say, okay, there's some of this you have to release. There's resistance there a lot of times because they feel guilty if they're not doing all of these things, again, the society thing, telling them, oh, this is what you should be doing versus recognizing this is where I'm at emotionally and physically, and this is what I need to do. I don't need to feel guilty for focusing on myself
Yeah.
because it radiates to your children. Everybody else can see it and feel it and sense it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we behave in ways that are controlling those on the receiving end of that, oftentimes we'll rebel against that or resist
Hmm.
against that. And so it actually ends up being harder than, kind of seeking the win-win, what's
Oh, a
consensus or
hundred
what's
percent.
win-win, or it's so much easier
Yes.
to go win-win.
Mhm.
But it's hard to give up that control, or perfectionism. I see also, especially if, imagine that before you became a mom, you were, maybe in a work position where you're very organized and you do this, and now you kind of try to transfer those skills to the family, which in some ways can be very helpful, obviously being organized. And some of that is very appropriate and can be done in non-controlling ways. But if you try to kind of run everything like a micromanager kind of running things, then yeah, that
Mhm.
can really, not only does that create that resistance, but if it's a sense of perfectionism, then that can affect self-esteem, ours as well as kids and other people. And again, we're trying to do everything instead of, imagine, how do we get so good at solving problems? Well, we've solved them. Well, how do we want our kids to become good at solving problems? They need to learn how to solve problems. They need to be able to have those experiences. So us running everything in a way is kind of doing them a disservice by not giving them the opportunity to learn how to do that. And to allow them to do
Mm.
that, we have to not be perfectionistic because they're not going to do it perfect the first time. So we
Yeah.
really have to, what's kind of the bottom line, maybe quality, or
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah, I can remember I fold my towels a certain way. I always say this in my classes, like, raise your hand if you have a certain way you do towels, and half the room will go, yes, like I want it done a certain way. So when you're encouraging your kids to help with the chores and you're teaching them how to fold towels, how much do you emphasize it has to be done your way? Or just for starters, can they just do it their way? That at least it can still stack, you know?
Yeah.
And if you can get help, hey, get help however you can first. Every single family member ended up coming back to me going, "How do you do that?" Because it's like you just kind of drop it on the towel rack. Like, how do you do that? It's not any brain science or anything, but they were
Mm.
ready. Once they got the basics of it, then they were ready to do something or find their own way,
Yeah.
and that there's more than
I
one
love that you
way of
say the
doing
find your
tasks.
yeah, the find your own way. So to me, I was the very type A. I had everything organized. Oh, I was the one in high school. I was in president of this, doing this or that, and I I had years where I was finally phasing it off, and I would let my son, he would look at me and he's like, "Well, Mom, I'm gonna do it this way," or "I wanna do it this way," or "I don't like that," and so there was that resistance like you're talking about, and I finally gradually learned more and more to let that go, and honestly, Jody, the majority of the time, his ideas or what he wants to do are so out of the box or better. I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's do that instead.
Yeah,
And that gives them the sense of accomplishment too, right?
absolutely.
So it's a win-win. You're taking it off your plate and they're coming up with these as well. So it gives them that, boost. Oh, yeah, I can do it. Thank you. You're allowing me to.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that because they don't quote need you that you aren't needed. Like, I think there's a thing
Yes.
within us moms that we would like being needed. We don't want to be disposable. Like, if we're not needed anymore, then we're disposable. And that's hard, especially as your kids get older, finding healthy ways of separating and allowing them to be independent. But, our kids are, hopefully, we always are going to have a connection with our kids. It just changes as they get to be older. That we can transform that relationship into something, as we go through the ages, that they may not need us in this way, but, hopefully, there may come a time where they don't need us, but they want to be in a relationship with us. Like, that's
Mhm.
ideal. Like, I wouldn't want my kids
Yeah.
to visit with me out of obligation. I would want for them to want to be with me, you know. So yeah, that
Yeah.
whole sense of
Exactly.
I feel like I don't have a purpose if I'm not needed, I think is another
Mhm.
common thing with moms that can get us
Yeah.
into doing and not
I 100% agree with that. Yes, because that's how your identity ends up being formed when you first have a child is like you're saying, they're attached to you all the time. And if you're nursing, then they just really are attached to
yeah,
you.
literally.
So your identity is their mom, ensuring that they're safe to your best capacity and helping them learn and grow. But as they get older, then we sort of have this, oh wait, am I as needed as I once was? Well, yes, just like you said, you have to pivot. And I think you're right. I think that's where the guilt starts to transition a little bit because at first you can't, it's almost impossible to get away from them, but the more and more you do, then the guilt sort of builds a little bit. And that's when you need to kind of do the work and say, okay, wait a minute. Let me look at this from a different light.
Yeah. I'm healthier for it. They can do better. But human beings are born with the innate capacity of solving problems. When you have a baby in your belly and they're cramped, they push, like they
Mhm.
stretch. So we all are capable of it. So we just have to give kids the opportunity, give them some space, maybe teach a few skills, give them a little bit of freedom to practice those skills so that they can become more independent and it makes it easier to let go with that.
Yeah,
Well, we're down to our last
absolutely.
couple of minutes, so I want to ask in closing, what would you suggest? So folks have listened, have joined us and listened for this. So, what would you say would be a good next step for someone after they're done with this? What's one thing that you would suggest that folks do as a follow up to this? And any recommended resources or anything that you would share for kind of that next step or beyond?
Sure. I really advocate for the baby steps. So I would say that very first thing that we did talk about, because you can listen to something, you can be in it, and then when it's over, you can kind of transition and not do anything. So I would really encourage that top three list, just of the 5 minutes or less. Like you said, the meditation, that's another one that I super love. Make that list, take action. And it's such an easy way to take action. So I would really encourage that. And the other thing that I've gotten lots of feedback about is I have a quiz and it's supposed to be just for fun. I feel like moms have so much on their plate and there's lots of things going. It's fun to just dream about opportunities and just find out what kind of dreamer you are. So I also have that, hey mom, what kind of dreamer are you quiz. You can just take for fun. It's a good brain break instead of scrolling and, kind of consuming other things.
That sounds great. If you put that into the chat, I will put that into the where the link to the recording is. I will put
Oh,
that
okay.
in there and folks can check that out too. So,
Sure.
and then give the
Absolutely.
name of your website where folks can reach you,
Sure.
which is me time and the number 4 for mom. So me
Yeah.
time
Me
number 4
time for mom.
mom.com. So, and I will put
Yes.
those in with a link to the recording also. So,
Yeah, and I would love to hear feedback. If you have things that you like for those 5 minutes or less, somebody has these ideas that they say, this works for me here, I want to share with others. Please, please do. Because like I said, unless we start waving the flag and letting everybody else know, it's not out there. So let's all do it for one another, please.
that's great. And I told Christy I'm going to put this one up on YouTube as a public video. So there's always comments available in YouTube. So feel free to comment there. If you're viewing this through our e-learning site, there's usually a way of making comments there too. So do connect with Christy, do connect with each other, be supportive of each other, and encouraging to other moms, and do take some me time for you, mom. over this every day. Do something nice for yourself, and especially during the busy times of the season and in the year, make an extra effort to do something nice for yourself.
Yes,
Well, thank
absolutely.
you again, Christy, and thanks everybody for joining us and watching our recordings. And we'll be back again next month for Parents Tool Talk. Take care, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.